Hello, everybody. This is Advocate Lucinda, your empowerment lawyer. A post asked me a question about the continuing wrong doctrine. And I thought it would be a good idea to do this video because many of you may have this question. And of course, this continuing wrong violation is applicable to the statute of limitations. Let me make a distinction. That is not the 300-day rule under Title VII. That's applicable to employment discrimination. But this continuing wrong doctrine could be applicable to any situation. So let's get started. So let's define continuing wrong. The continuing wrong doctrine is an exception to the general rule that is usually employed where there is a series of continuing wrongs and serves to toll or temporarily stop the running of a period of limitations to the date of the commission of the last wrongful act. Now, what the continuing wrong is not a single breach. And what do we mean by that? When a wrongdoer permits a single act of wrongdoing, and as a result of that single act of wrongdoing, the person suffers a continuous injury. You got that? The person suffers a continuing injury from the single act. Okay? So there's two things we want to focus on. One, the timeline. And the second is the statute of limitations. Of course, every state has its own statute of limitation and what that time period is. And so we are going to get into this by illustrating this principle with the case. We're going to look at Harrison versus Valentini. It is a 2005 Kentucky case. Miss Harrison was a patient of Dr. Valentini. Prior to October 2nd, 1997, she had breast implants. As a result, her breasts were disfigured. So she had to have treatment with Dr. Valentini and continuous treatment with Dr. Valentini, and the treatment did not work. She was still disfigured. So she sued Dr. Valentini for medical malpractice. So let's look at it more closely here. On October 2nd, 1997, plaintiff underwent breast lift surgery, as I said, due to disfigurement of her breast resulting from the breast implants. Plaintiff continued her treatment with the defendant until April 11, 2000. 7 months later, on November 16, 2000, plaintiff filed a lawsuit against the defendant for medical malpractice. So let's see what the parties argued. The defendant moved for summary judgment on the ground that plaintiff's lawsuit was barred by the statute of limitations, in that she did not file it within 1 year. Plaintiff argued the statute of limitations should have been tolled or temporarily stopped. She asked the court to recognize the continuous course of treatment rule. Now, what is the continuous course of treatment rule? Under the doctrine, the statute of limitations is tolled or temporarily stopped as long as the patient is under the continuing care of the physician for the injury caused by the negligent act or omission. And you can find this language in the case at page 524. Now, the court made a ruling. What do you think the court ruled? Well, let's see. The court ruled that applying the continuous course of treatment rule, plaintiff's suit against the doctor was timely filed, and that she filed suit on November 16, 2000, well within 1 year of her discontinuance of treatment with the defendant. And you can find this language at page 525 in the case law. So let's recap. We have these dates. I just want you to see them. October 2nd, 1997, she underwent surgery. On April 11, 2000, she stopped treatment with the physician. 7 months later, she filed the lawsuit on November 16, 2000. Because remember, she has a 1 year statute of limitation to file the lawsuit. So how does she get away with 2.5 years later filing the lawsuit and the court agreeing that her lawsuit was filed timely? Well, because of the continuing course of treatment rule that is applicable to medical treatment. So let's see how the court applied the continuing wrong doctrine in conjunction with the continuing course of treatment rule. The court in this case relied on the treatment concept of a doctor versus a patient and the good faith principle. So here's what the court said. Where a patient relies in good faith on his physician's advice and treatment, or knowing that the physician had rendered poor treatment but continues treatment in an effort to allow the physician to correct any consequences of the poor treatment, the continuous course of treatment doctrine operates to toll or temporarily stop the statute of limitations until the treatment terminates, at which time running of the statute begins. So let me state this more simply. Miss Harrison, she relied upon Dr. Valentini's expertise. Thus, it was reasonable for her to receive the treatment to afford Dr. Valentini the opportunity to correct the disfigurement Dr. Valentini's ongoing treatment failed to correct the disfigurement. Because remember, Dr. Valentini is the expert. So, in other words, the court concluded he had time to get this right, and he didn't. And the burden shouldn't be on Miss Harrison because she's just an individual. She didn't have the insight that Dr. Valentini had. So he failed her. And the court found that Miss Harrison permitting the physician to continue to give her the treatment was a good faith effort on her part to try to resolve this before filing a lawsuit. And thus, the continuing wrong doctrine is applicable. Got it? So, in a nutshell, regarding the application of the continuing wrong doctrine rule, it hinges on the facts of each case. For example, here, where the continuing cause of treatment rule was applied, the principle, remember this, is the same. And once the date of the last wrongful act is triggered or identified, then the statute of limitations begins to run. That's the heart of it. Okay? Okay, guys. I trust this was helpful. I am Advocate Lucinda, and we will see you next time. Take care.